Welcome in, everyone. Today, we're jumping into a fascinating medical puzzle known as intestinal atresia. It's a condition where a newborn's digestive system has a complete blockage right from the start. We're going to explore how it happens, and even cooler, how doctors use some seriously clever clues to figure it out and fix it. So here's our game plan. We'll kick things off by explaining what the problem is. Then we'll dive into the two major ways it can happen. After that, we get to do a little medical detective work with x-rays. And we'll wrap up by looking at the amazing surgical solutions. Let's get into it. All right, let's start with the basics. First things first, what exactly is intestinal atresia? At its heart, it's a pretty straightforward idea. Just picture a pipeline that's been completely sealed off, or even has a whole section missing. This is a congenital condition, which just means a baby is born with it. It creates a total roadblock, so nothing can pass through the intestine. Now, this is really key. The condition basically gets split into two main camps. On one side, you have duodenal atresia. This happens right at the beginning of the small intestine, and it's because of a flaw in the body's original blueprint. On the other side, you have non-duodenal atresia. This happens farther down the line, and it's not a blueprint error, it's more like an injury, a problem with blood flow that happened in the womb. Same result, a blockage, but two totally different origin stories. So let's zoom in on that first type, which is also the most common one, duodenal atresia. You can really think of this as a tiny but supercritical glitch during the body's earliest construction phase. Okay, this process is absolutely wild. Early on in development, the gut starts out as a hollow tube, just like you'd expect. But then it completely fills in with cells and becomes a solid cord. After that, a process called recanalization is supposed to kick in, hollowing out the center to make it a tube again. Well, in duodenal atresia, that final hollowing out step, it just doesn't happen correctly, and you're left with a permanent roadblock. So a few important things to know here. Like I said, this is the most common form, and it has a known connection with trisomy 21, or Down syndrome, that really reinforces this idea of it being a blueprint issue. And the blockage itself can look different. It might be just a thin little membrane, kind of like a spider web, or it could be a complete gap where the two ends of the intestine aren't even connected. Now, for the doctors on the ground, this is where some real detective work comes in. How a newborn vomits tells them a huge amount. With duodenal atresia, it happens fast, within a day or two, and it's bilious. That means it's greenish because it has bile in it. That's a massive clue. It confirms the blockage is after the stomach, which is where bile gets added. It immediately helps them tell it apart from other things, like pyloric stenosis, where the vomit shows up weeks later and doesn't have any bile. Okay, let's shift gears. We're now moving further down the intestine, and we're leaving that glitch in the blueprint idea behind. This next category is all about an event, an injury, that happened before the baby was even born. And here is the big contrast. This isn't about a failed hollowing out process. This kind of blockage is caused by what's called an ischemic injury. Basically, the blood supply from a really important artery got cut off for a bit. A piece of the developing intestine just couldn't survive, and that's what creates the blockage. It's a totally different mechanism. And this quote right here describes something so incredibly visual. Sometimes that blood flow issue can cause the intestine to twist around its own blood supply in a spiral. Surgeons call it the apple peel configuration. I mean, how memorable is that? It's a very specific sign that tells them the exact story of what went wrong. All right, now for my absolute favorite part of this whole thing, the diagnosis. This is where modern medicine just feels like pure, brilliant detective work, using a simple x-ray to look for these perfect telltale clues. So here's the big idea. When a baby is born, they start swallowing air, right? That air travels down their digestive tract until it hits the wall. On an x-ray, this trapped air and fluid shows up looking just like a bubble. And believe it or not, the number of bubbles a doctor sees tells them exactly where that roadblock is. It's really just a simple counting game. You see one bubble on the x-ray? Okay, that's just the stomach filled with air. That points to that other condition we mentioned earlier, pyloric stenosis, where the blockage is right at the exit of the stomach. But what happens if you see two bubbles? Now that's the classic double bubble sign. That's the stomach bubble plus a second bubble right after it in the duodenum. And that points the finger directly at duodenal atresia. And I bet you can guess what's next. If you see a triple bubble sign, well, that means the air made it a little bit further down the road before it got stopped. This tells the doctor the blockage is in the next part of the intestine, the jejunum. And finally, if the x-ray shows multiple bubbles all over the place, it tells you the air got pretty far, all the way to the last section of the small intestine, the ileum, before it hit the blockage. It's just such a simple, elegant diagnostic tool. You just count the bubbles. So the case is cracked. We know where the problem is. Now what? Let's get to the most hopeful part of the story, reconnecting that path and fixing the problem for good. You know, the surgical fix is perfectly tailored to the problem. For that blueprint error type, the duodenal atresia, surgeons will usually create a little bypass around the blockage. But for the other types caused by that ischemic injury, they'll actually remove the damaged part and then just stitch the two healthy ends back together. Two different problems, two brilliant solutions.